obviously you've been a successful athlete yourself, and you've obviously now you're working with your own teams. As you go through and you're coaching your athletes, what would you say are the biggest parts of just training for the sport that you try to emphasize with them?
I would say, and I've actually noticed this a lot with my All-Star team recently, because we're in a building program. We haven't gotten to that national level yet.
Mm-hmm.
The big things to focus on are kind of almost more mental than physical. It's more making them accountable. Like if groups aren't hitting, you should be the one to get on them, but they should know that their teammates are counting on them to hit those skills. So usually if I have a group that's not hitting, I'll say, if we're not all hitting as one group, then everyone has to do 5 standing tucks or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
As well as skill-wise, I would say the basics, as long as they have those basics down, it's really hard to have them try to go from, nothing to double ups or to 1.5 ups, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been working on a lot of things, just straight from the bottom. We do a warm-up at the beginning of practice, and they all have to hit, and they're simple skills, they're starting skills, straight ups, one leg, switches, and regular full-ups.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to hit as a group. I would say it's the biggest thing, just to almost get them more involved, because it's fine if 3 hit once and then the next time all hit but the one that fell, that one hits. Then technically they've all hit, but they haven't hit together, so they have to keep going again. And after they realize that you're not doing it just to make them angry or to make them tired, they kind of get that it's a team thing, and then they'll start making each other accountable instead of you being the one that's beating down on them.
Nice. So, but before they start throwing the stunts at the beginning of practice, what do you have them do for a warm-up in general?
What we did at IU, and then what we've brought to the high school and the All-Star team, is we've kind of done like a plyometric warm-up.
Mm-hmm.
So they get in lines on the mat within their stunt group or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they do like karaoke both ways, high leg kicks, like hip rotations,
Mm-hmm.
Hamstring stretch, quad stretch, lunges with a deep turn, things like that. And then we give them about 5 minutes to do static stretching after that.
Nice. And so when you're going through the progressions and coaching, specifically kind of coming from the bases standpoint, I guess, let me try to phrase this a little bit more. Since obviously you're working with a main, a side, and a back, whenever you're just coaching in general, working with your athletes and a skill, let's say they're just doing a full up, who do you look at first, or what do you try to look at first when they're throwing the stunt?
The first thing that I look at, and I'm not sure if it's habit, but I look at the bases, because usually if the top girl's doing something wrong, it might be something that the bases are doing. So once I have them fixed, then I'll look at the top girl. The biggest things I see with main bases are they're dropping their elbow into their belly button when they spin, which is getting their top girl out of line. Instead of keeping that all the way straight till they get about their chin, then they can drop that elbow so they keep her in that line. And then I watch for the back spot and the side base to really be nice and quick from the bottom to about eye level, and then get quick to the back. The quicker that they can grab the feet and the heels, the less jolting it's going to be for them. So if it's landing and they're moving around a lot, or if it's overspinning just a little bit, it's probably the side base, back spot, and the main base's back arm just not getting there fast enough to stop it.
Okay. Nice.
And then for the top girl, usually, and it might, obviously because I haven't done pull-ups as a top girl, I'll videotape it and I'll see the way they're standing. A lot of top girls try to stand all the way up and then turn their hips at the very top, which just gives them less room to spin. They have to do the skill in a smaller amount of time. So the big thing that Tony would always have us do at IU was have them practice just standing on the ground in like a fake low position and standing up to the quarter. Because the top girl's job is just to stand up to the quarter, and then the main base will finish it.
Okay. Nice. And with the level of kids you're working with, are they throwing pyramids also in the routine?
They're doing, we're probably doing a little bit more advanced pyramids at my all-star team. It's a level 5 team that I work with.
Nice.
Then at my high school team, we try to do more single-based skills, I would say, just because the team's smaller.
Mm-hmm. So, what would be essentially your advice that you typically give any mid-layer?
Middle layers, the biggest thing, it's tricky. I would say it's harder for top girls who are going to be middle layers to understand the concept because they're not used to catching someone else. So bases who are mid layers usually can get the concept of it a little bit easier. But the biggest thing for top girls is to be aggressive with it. For straight up skills, it's a big thing to talk to them about open shoulder versus closed shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
An open shoulder would be if you're looking at the top girl and her shoulder is turned backwards, so she's not squared to you.
Mm-hmm.
Closed shoulder would be if both of her shoulders are squared to the front.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, if something's sweeping, the middle layer has their shoulder closed, which is cutting off the line where the tippy top can stand on the leg. They're sweeping the feet.
Mm-hmm.
And an open shoulder would be almost where they can look right at them as they're holding them on their leg.
Nice. So then, what's your typical advice when you work with your toe pitch groups?
Toe pitch groups, it's a lot of finish and follow through. A lot of people worry about either trying to get to their bottom layer quick enough, which is understandable. That's a lot of weight for them to hold. But if they try to get there too quick, they're not finishing their throw, and they're actually making it harder for the bottom layer because they're not giving it as much height. They're not giving the middle layer as much time to see the skill. And then the other thing I would say is the main toe pitch. They usually tend to step out of it and look at the step that they're throwing instead of step through it to finish. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
Like stepping into that tossing hand so that they can finish it and almost place it right where they want. And usually guys are tall enough to where if they're staying into it, they can literally place it right where they want.
Mm-hmm.
Girls obviously aren't, but if they stay into it, they can get that finish that it needs.
Nice. And then, aside from take the pain and deal with it, what's your advice to shoulder stands?
That's tough because we usually do just tell them to take the pain. I mean, you do want to make sure that the middle layers know that if they need to readjust, they need to lift their feet and step instead of scooting them.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that the hard way. But it would be to tell the middle layer what's comfortable for them. It might not feel comfortable for the middle layer, but they're the ones holding the weight, so what feels most comfortable for them is what needs to happen so that they can hold it where they need to.
Nice.
I know that's not really the question that you asked.
No, that's fair.
But
that's usually just try not to move, and at some point you will move, and it's not your fault half the time. But yeah, with yourself when you were competing, what do you think was essentially either the thing you learned that helped you the most with mid-layering, or something that someone told you that helped you the most?
Just middle layering in general.
Just repetition?
I would say probably the thing that helped me the most is that I would try to go and get it. Being a base, I didn't have a problem with being aggressive, and I would lean into the skill, which caused the whole pyramid to travel inward. So I had to learn how to be the perfect amount of aggressive, but not too aggressive to where I would move the pyramid, and trust the toe pitch. Let them fix it at the bottom if something's not going right. And then the thing that I see a lot of middle layers do is they're not watching the top girl's hips or feet where they're going to grab. A lot of people, and I've done this to a couple of your girls before, they're just looking forward because they're in the air, they're a top girl, but they're not looking at their top girl. But the biggest thing that a lot of middle layers don't realize, because middle layering isn't natural, is that they have to watch, because even though they're in the air, they're also a base. And you'd rather see the stunt in the air and you're face down looking at the top girl's feet so you can reposition her if she needs to, than your face looking out at the crowd.
Okay. Nice.
And then another thing that Tony taught this is the way he liked to coach, but I liked it this way because I was aggressive, was that the middle layer is always in charge. So if I needed the tippy top to do something, I would let them know. They never tried to readjust themselves if the grips weren't perfectly, unless I told them, pick up your foot, scoot a little this way. Otherwise, it was up to me to fix it. Because if we're both trying to work to fix the grips without communicating, then something's going to slip. It's not going to go right. So my tippy tops always knew to listen to me or just to let me hold them there if it was in a place where I could hold them securely.
Nice. And so then transitioning from doing pyramids to baskets, how do you try and teach that to your athletes currently, and or obviously when you used to be throwing them yourself?
Well, now the baskets that I teach are as elite as the collegiate level baskets. The biggest thing, though, for whatever kind of basket you're throwing is a lot of bases try to keep their arms tight when they're in that basket grip instead of letting them loose. And a big thing to think about is almost think like your hands are a rubber band. So you should be having a nice hold, like grip on your hands, but your arms should be straight and relaxed. That way you can shrug all the way up. If your hands are at the bottom, you can think about shrugging through your shoulders, your elbows, and finishing with a flick at the top. A lot of people hold their arms so tight that it actually makes them look outward and their back bends backwards, and then they don't get to throw as high. So just a lot of legs and then staying close so you can get that full shrug up.
It's kind of, I always have a hard time approaching that where you want them to have a good death grip on their wrist and their partner's wrist, but the idea of still being loose in the arms while you're trying to throw, it's a little counterintuitive, I guess I'd say, in the beginning.
I know. It's kind of in what they do sometimes, what we do sometimes at camps and stuff, and sometimes it works, sometimes it's hard. But usually we have them get in that basket grip, then we put our hands on their basket and try to wiggle it around a little bit and say, relax your arms, so they can feel what that's supposed to feel like. The second the top girl jumps in, it's kind of hard because you're bearing her weight. But that's where it really comes in the legs. Let your legs do that part of the work. And then that quick shrug up with your legs extending will help there.
Nice. So, in general, what would you advise your bases to do if they need to increase their power on their baskets, on their toe pitch, or just even in their stunts in general?
A lot of it, especially for all girl, comes from speed. And that's what my girls are starting to learn right now at the All-Star Gym. They have the technique, but like, say a full, for example, they have the technique down, and it's not fast enough. So the spin is actually finishing on the weight down instead of, well, it's still weightless and they can move the top girl where they need to. So a lot of that is just technique and using legs. For toe pitches, especially for the secondary, to just focus on their only job being speed up the main toe pitch. For baskets, just making sure that I usually tell like my all-star team, I say, top girl, I want you to beat your bases to the top of the basket, but bases, I want you to try to beat your top girl to the basket. So they're all focusing on how fast they can stand so they can get that snap. Another thing I did yesterday that actually surprisingly worked well, our top girls loaded in on 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the basket was supposed to throw on 5. I had all the girls yell 5. And while that's something obvious, they're in high school, they know what count they're supposed to go. They were thinking about that 5, so they were really thinking about throwing it high, and then all of our baskets actually got in line together instead of kind of looking like popcorn in the air.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, nice. And then kind of sticking with the broad theme, what do you think helped you the most in general when you were being a competitive cheer athlete?
I would say the biggest thing was probably the leadership of the upperclassmen for me. Because I found that the less I knew, the less stressed I was, obviously. My more stressful years of competitive cheerleading was when I was older and I understood more of what was going on. But it's really about the upperclassmen explaining, the needs for things. Coach wants us to do one more full out, you guys. Like, are we going to regret not doing one more full out when we get there? Or are we going to regret doing one more that makes us better? Things like that. And teaching athletes about mental toughness. Tony would always tell us to have a short memory. So if something went wrong in the skill, you forget about it. You don't want to carry that on to your next skill. You forget and you move on, and you make the rest of your routine hit instead of focusing for the rest, for a minute or a minute 30 later. Oh my gosh, my skill fell. Now I have to make this one much more perfect, and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Short memory and figuring out how to get back into it.
Nice. And you kind of actually immediately answered the next question I was going to ask you, which is, of the people on the team, who are the most important? So I'd say, were the leaders actual, true elected captains, or is it just kind of you look to the seniors and the juniors as leaders, kind of by default?
I would say it's a little bit of both. At IU, we never had elected leaders. We just had the seniors, but you knew, the 2 or 3 seniors who were really kind of the ones in charge. We had 7 seniors, but
Mm-hmm.
not 7 people can be captains on the team.
Yeah.
You had those 3 that would be able to give you that extra push or those skill things that you need while you're working on a new skill, something like that. So Tony always made it known, or like that, like who you should be listening to, and then kind of let us decide who was going to really step up and take charge. And I would say it's just easier that way.
Mm-hmm.
Usually because, there might be some really talented freshmen or sophomores, but they've still only been there for a year or 2, and they might not know everything they think they know.
Mm-hmm.
And while they can be leaders in an aspect like pyramids or like baskets, it might get if it's too much, it might be stepping on people's toes.
Mm-hmm. So, speaking with the leadership currently with the teams you coach, how do you kind of help foster that or work with that?
It's kind of tougher in high school because they're not as willing to be those people. They haven't figured out how to get the drive from their teammates, and it's not as popular, I guess, to be the ones that want to be hardworking.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll usually group together the seniors and make sure that they know that they can be the leaders, even if it's for something simple, like, hey, like this week we had a competition and we have mini buddies on the in the gym. So we had them give them bid luck cards. I made one of the seniors in charge of making sure everyone got their bid luck cards filled out. And then we actually have a junior on the team who probably the 3 of us who coach trust her the most,
Mm-hmm.
just because she leads by action.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll go over to her, and we won't make it obvious. Like, we won't, in front of the whole team, be like, hey, come over here. We want to talk to you about being in charge. But as she's walking out of the gym, or I'll get, kind of gauge the feel of some of the trusted members, if that makes sense.
Oh,
the
yeah.
ones who are, get the feel for the team on how things are going, and I'll kind of say some things to them and be like, well, we really need to get the team to do something like this, or I really want you guys to work harder. Or even the other day, I just flat out told them, the whole team as a whole, I really need you guys to take accountability for something like this. It's not okay to not care when your friends aren't hitting the stunts and we're doing it 10 times in a row.
Mm-hmm.
And even if that only affects one person, hopefully they feel driven enough to stand up and say something about it.
Nice. So, and you maybe just hit upon it, what would you say is your biggest challenge as a coach?
I would say it probably depends team by team. But the biggest challenge I'm noticing right now is that divide between the hard workers and the ones that think they're working hard,
Mm-hmm.
but become defensive when you try to call them out on it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in high school, like I said, it's not always cool to tell your friends, hey, we need to work harder, hey, we need to do this again.
Mm-hmm.
So it's trying to build that between, the non-hard workers and the hard workers, compliment them when they do something, out of the ordinary, like staying after and doing those 5 extra reps, but kind of get on them for things like talking while the coaches are talking, or talking while we're trying to explain something. That would probably be my biggest challenge,
Mm-hmm.
just because once we get them in the gym, they work hard on the things they want to work hard on. So we try to push them on those things that they don't want to do so that they can become easy. And we tell them that. I told them, I want you guys to come back in a month and laugh about how much you were struggling with this because you're doing so well in it in a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So, and obviously this is a very self-involved question, but what do you think someone can do as a coach to try to become better at it? Or what do you suggest they do?
I would say really the thing to think about, and I'm obviously still learning, is understanding all of the basics and knowing those people that you can count on or how you're going to need to talk to people. You know, there might be one girl that needs you to yell at her for that flip to switch. There might be another that the second you yell at her, she says she wants to quit.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of knowing when to push those buttons and when to back off. And then just knowing the technique to back yourself. I've had a lot of girls that I think they thought since I was young, I might not know that much, and then they say, it's wild, when you told me to try this, it actually worked. You know, and I'm like, imagine that. You know, so kind of making sure you can back up what you say or stick with what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I have trouble with that sometimes. You know, if we have to hit 3 or we're going to keep doing it, and then I'll feel bad for those hard workers who just can't hit it. Mm-hmm. But you have to stick with what you're saying, otherwise they'll always know that they can shortcut it out.
Yeah, it's like parenting, I guess, you know. As soon as you show weakness, right. They take advantage. So,
yeah.
And obviously since you staff and you've obviously been around the sport a lot, what mistake, and this isn't a judgment of them, but what mistake do you see a lot of other coaches making?
I would say this is a pretty easy one, and like I've done it myself, it's just getting so frustrated with the team that you just make them continue to do something without giving them any corrections. Mm-hmm. Or just getting angry at them. I had right when I first started coaching a couple months ago, I had trouble with, you know, coming from a team that was so self-driven and a team that wasn't as self-driven, it was hard for me not to just get mad and say, well, they should know they should do this again. You know, kind of laying everything flat out for them so they know your expectations. Mm-hmm. Because I didn't lay out my expectations, so they were confused when I was mad that they dropped the skill and didn't make it up afterwards. Or saying, do it again, do it again, do it again, with no instruction on why you're doing it again or how to fix it. Mm-hmm.
So is there anything that you like to do with coaching that you don't see a lot of other coaches doing?
Oh, that's a good question.
Take your time.
Yeah, let me think about that one. I know there's something that they did with us during Team USA that I just don't think a lot of coaches do. And it's kind of, again, something that I probably picked up by Tony, but it's another thing just to add to that accountability. We do this thing called 1s and 5s. Have you heard of it?
No.
So it's like you have 5 stunkers, usually for nationals. You can do 1s and 8s or 1s and 3s, how many stunkers you have. Mm-hmm. So you'll go down the row, and every stunt group will do their stunt or their stunt sequence by themselves, and everyone watches them. And then once all 5, or however many you have done it all and hit it, they go as a group, and you can't move on until everyone has hit that. And that's how we would warm up. And the good thing about that is you're seeing how other people are doing the skills, and you can either help them or you can learn from them. And then it's just adding to that accountability. If one group's struggling, are you going to let them sit there and struggle, or are you going to be the teammate that picks them up? So I would say that, and then Tony used to do this one, which I know as a cheerleader I hate, but as a coach I see a lot of. I see why he would do this. He would put sections of the routine in like a hat, and we would pull it out. Oh. We would have to do that section full out until it hits. Oh. And as an athlete, it was horrible. But you could put things in like water break, or you know, like they had one that said leave practice early, and we just never picked it out of our luck. We never got to grab that one.
Sure, you just didn't put it in.
As simple as what?
Sure, you didn't just put it in. Just kept it hidden.
No, he kept putting them in. They were trying to get us out of the gym, and because they were like, you can save one, you can have one skip where you choose to skip whatever you pull.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be like, do you want to skip this one? And we were all waiting to grab out a full out. So we were like, no, we're saving our skip for the full out. And they were really just trying to get us to leave practice. But they could be things like mark through or just opening tucks. But they would have to be perfect for us to be able to move on. Mm-hmm. And that's something more, I guess, you could do towards the end of the season, or once you've kind of started to perfect everything and you know that the girls or the guys can do all those skills, and they just need to start rubbing it to make it look better.
Nice. So back when you were cheering at Indiana, what did you do non-actual stunting, pyramids, etc., outside of practice as far as training?
As far as training, we had open gym twice a week, where we could just come in and do whatever we wanted. If we needed to bring our stunt group in to work on skills, we could. If we wanted to make our tumbling better, we could. Mm-hmm. Or if we just wanted to play around, we could grab some friends and do some new stunts. Our coaches would come, and they would sit there, so that obviously you need a coach, but they would only help you if you asked for it, unless you're playing around, or we would get together and do things like that. Mm-hmm. I know now IU has training on Tuesday mornings, so just once a week, mm-hmm. But now they're actually getting into the weight room and able to use those kind of things. Mm-hmm. When I was in high school, I did physical conditioning, and that really helped me a lot then, because I kind of went from an in-between of, I don't know if I'm a top girl or a base. Mm-hmm. So they never knew where to put me, and I was, too weak to hold anything up, but not good enough to be a top girl. And then I started weightlifting, and it defined my place. So I always, if there's anyone that's hurting on the team, I always suggest they go weightlift.
Nice. Sounds good. And so with the team that you coach right now, so they go through the dynamic warm-up, and then they do stunts together. How do you like to organize the rest of the practice from there?
One thing that we've actually learned recently is that they like it when we write what we're doing on the board so they can mentally prepare. We mm-hmm. used to just tell them, and now we'll write it on the board so they see what we're going to have to do during the practice. But we'll usually do dynamic, then static stretching. We'll go through tumbling first, and we'll either do it in parts of their routine, or we'll say, okay, everyone line up, we're going to do hand-to-hand tucks, or, whatever. And they'll either do it all together, and it kind of depends on the day if we let them move on or if everyone has to hit it, mm-hmm. how close we are to competition. Mm-hmm. And then we'll do the same thing with stunts and then pyramid. If it's not really too stressful of a week, like we don't have anything coming up, we'll give them choices. We won't necessarily let them choose, but we'll say, do you want to do a stunting routine or do you want to do a tumbling routine? Mm-hmm. So they get to choose what they do, and then they're building endurance without killing their bodies doing full outs after full outs.
Yeah.
Something that we did at IU that really helped our bodies was that Tony would have us do limited full out, which means all of the tumbling is through to tucks, including baskets. And while I don't know if that was physically easier or mentally easier, it helped a lot.
Yeah.
And then you're building up that endurance without
the harder impacts of landing the fulls.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, speaking of the routines, how do you like to start as far as putting together their actual nationals routine or otherwise?
I did not get to choreograph for the all-star team. We had a choreographer come in. For the high school team that I worked in, we started with the tuck, and then we moved on. In Indiana, you have to have a ton of tumbling. Mm-hmm. So we moved on to standing tumbling and then our partner stunt. Mm-hmm. At IU, we always started with a tuck, and then we moved to probably a hard skill so we could do it before we're winded. Mm-hmm. But get that tuck in there to kind of release some of the nerves before you have to go do a super tricky stunt that you have to focus on. Mm-hmm. And then, depending on the team, if they're a strong tumbling team, you can save that for later on in the routine. If they're not as strong, I would say running tumbling after partner stunts, and then move on to baskets and pyramids, things like that. I'm a big fan, especially for UCA's ending in a pyramid. I know a lot of people like to end in dance, at least for All-Stars. That's how we end. But, yeah. But for our all-star team, we do our standing tumbling first because we're pretty good at standing tumbling, but we have a couple who struggle in it.
Mm-hmm.
So we try to do it first so they're not stressing about that.
Yeah.
We go to our elite stunts, and then we go to jumps. Jumps is really an afterthought for them, so we can do that right after the elite.
Mm-hmm.
From there, they go to baskets and pyramids, and then tumbling, and then dance.
Nice. Yeah, it's one thing I enjoyed about being a UCA cheerleader is dance was never a thing until I started working with the all-girl, and yeah, every time they hit that section, I'm gonna go use the bathroom. You guys let me know when you're ready to do something I actually know how to coach.
Yeah.
So
at least it's only so long in UCA.
Yeah. And in general, with the routines that you see, or I guess rephrase, with the routines that obviously you've thrown at nationals, and obviously everybody gets nerves before they go out there. What's your advice with your athletes or maybe your teammates back in the day to get people to go out there and execute?
To like get over nerves?
Yeah, and how to say, people can have a bad run out there. You know, obviously, I'm sure a lot of teams have hit in their own home gyms, but obviously when they hit the nationals mat, well, sometimes they hit it literally. And so what advice would you have for kind of dealing with those nerves or just preparing yourself better for, you know, what it's going to be like to be on that big blue mat?
Okay. I would say, again, it goes back to the mindset of having a short memory, whether it's good or whether it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
Tony always said something that I never really thought of before I competed with him, which was control your adrenaline. A lot of people go out there and try to overthrow a stunt, and then it falls, and they didn't realize that it was going to do that. They've never dropped it before.
Mm-hmm.
So control your adrenaline. I would always let my adrenaline catch up to me during my tumbling, and that kind of helped me. And then I knew to control it during stunts and have, you know, the way that we got through our stunts usually was to just think about it like you're doing it in practice. And talking to each other is a really big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you're, you know, and you're not just saying, good, keep it up. You're reminding people of those little things that they might know, but they ask for that little reminder, like toes up or, you know, big shrug, hands up, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
It always calms me down to calm someone else down.
Yeah.
So I was always the one that was like, who needs someone to talk to in the routine? I got you. Because then you're not focusing on how tired you are or what went wrong already. You're just talking to someone else through the routine, or you're talking to yourself. We've had people like that who like to talk themselves through the routine. If a warm-up doesn't go perfectly, we'd always say that's okay. It keeps us focused on the mat. You don't want it to go perfect because then you're going to be too, you know, relaxed on the mat. So
Mm-hmm.
you kind of find the good, and then you get those senior leaders or junior leaders to kind of step up and make sure everyone's on the same page before you walk out.
Nice. So that's kind of the vast majority of what I wanted to ask you about. Is there anything that I haven't brought up that you'd like to talk about, or anything that kind of comes to mind?
I think you kind of hit it all.
And I
I
appreciate
feel like
you.
I've been talking a lot about it.
No, I appreciate you, you know, taking the time to talk with me. You know, thanks for, picking up the phone. And you know, I'm glad to hear that things are going. How soon do your teams compete?
Our all-star team has about a month until they go, and my high school team, we are done for the season.
Sounds a little bit of a cathartic. It's nice to be done for the season.
Mm-hmm. It was definitely a building year for my high school team, but we only compete until November. So I'm actually meeting with the other coaches tomorrow so we can discuss next season.
Oh yeah, and then so that, and obviously with high school, recruiting is not so much of a thing, is it? But what do you guys try to do any recruiting for the All-Star, or how does that even work?
For All-Star, it's kind of tricky to recruit as well, just because, you know, you have all those people who already have loyalty to their other gyms.
Yeah.
So what we were actually planning on doing for the coming years, just because we're thinking about the end of the year with our seniors, is starting to look at those younger ones and try to just talk it up to the ones who are still working on skills, still wanting to get better, so that they can get to the level that we compete at, and they can be a part of the team.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, I also coach with Liz Cross, who coaches at IU now. We've brought in the top girls every now and then, and we swim with them just so they can feel what it's supposed to feel like, and we thought we could bring in groups separately like that so we can give them a little bit of private instruction without stress.
Yeah.
And then hopefully, continue to get people that way.
Awesome.
And, obviously if they have people on our team have friends, we're always like, well, they can come to practice.
Hey, turns out if they're already friends with somebody, it's going to make it a little bit easier to fold them into the group.
Right.
So, and then just random off topic, what do you do in your spare time aside from coach?
Aside from coach, well, just this year I got a job at an elementary school. So I work as an aide, a resource aide with kindergartners and first graders, which keeps me pretty busy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I work out, and then my oldest sister just had a baby. She's the first baby of the family, so that keeps all of us pretty busy.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.